So in this video, we're going to be making a cityscape. And the cityscape is going to be like our version of a 1-point perspective drawing, but it will be in more than 1-point perspective. So I'm going to start with just a horizon. I'm making it a little bit higher than the center of the page. It doesn't really much matter. That's just where I want to put it. So my horizon, I'm not drawing too dark. Yeah, you can see that, barely. And then I'm going to give myself a vanishing point. I'm putting it slightly off center, well, let's put it slightly off center this way. Just for the sake of it being more interesting. Now, I am going to make a street that goes back to this vanishing point. If I make the street really thin, if I make a street that looks like this, if I make that my street, which is hard for you to see, then what it does is it makes me really far from the street. It makes me way up here, way up in the sky looking down on a road. That's what that looks like. Now, if I make this road really, really wide, then that puts me much lower, closer to the street. And these buildings then that I put on the street are going to be much larger. If I'm going to make this road wide like this, then I want to move my vanishing point and my horizon down so that my buildings are up above the horizon, because I'm about at ground level. I don't want to do an aerial perspective where I'm looking down on it from a plane or a hot air balloon or something like that. We will do that, but not in this video. And I don't want to do one where it's really wide, where I'm drawing giant, massive buildings. So I'm going to go somewhere in the middle and make a street about like this. I'm still mostly looking down on it, but I'm going to have buildings that come up above the horizon. So this is going to be my street. And I'm going to ignore these other lines. Now, if I want to make a city street, the easiest parts of these buildings I'm going to address first. This is a quote unquote 1-point perspective drawing, but I'm going to be aware of my vanishing points that are off the page in either direction. I'm dealing with points that are not on the page, and that makes this drawing a little bit challenging. So I can start by, I'm just going to pick a spot right here and make a building. I'm going to make a really light line here that just shows, maybe this is like the sidewalk. Let's make that a little bit bigger. There we go. Same size. So that's my sidewalk, or whatever, how far set back the buildings are. So I don't want to have any buildings that come in front of this, because then they're going to be really close to my street. I'm going to set this one back a little bit further. I'm just going to pick a spot and make a building. I'm going to make this building shorter than the horizon. I'll make it a little bit taller. No, shorter. It doesn't matter. I'm going to make multiple. So this is that line that's farthest away. So I'm basically making, just like I would a cube, like we showed in that first video, but I'm starting with this inside plane. Inside plane. So this is the front of my building that faces the street. So that's the easy part. It's figuring out where these lines that go this way go. If I was making just a 1-point perspective drawing, then this would be squared off like a perfect rectangle. And then that goes back to here, and this would be perfectly straight over that way. And that would look okay. but it wouldn't quite be right. So to help me out, I know this is my horizon. My vanishing point that's this way is really far that way. So as it comes down, things are going to start to tilt. And I'm just going to give myself, you'll notice that these lines, well, I can go ahead and put this one in because it's there. You'll notice that these lines that I'm putting in, these are just references for myself. They're not related to anything. These are so that I know as this line comes down, this gives me a more or less how tilted those lines should be. So I know this line here should be something like that. This one up here is going to be much flatter. So there we have it, a building that is in 2-point perspective, but this point over here is way off the page. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to make these lines a little darker so you can see them better what I'm doing. So as I bring this ruler down, I'm starting to tilt it. I'm moving my right hand faster than my left hand. So I hit my board there. So as I bring this down, all right, so I have quite an array of lines going on in this. So I have a vanishing point that's way over that way. I have a vanishing point that's way over this way. I could do the same thing coming up if I'm going to have things above the horizon. On either side. All right, so I have lots of lines going on in here. So let's put another building on this side, but let's make it cross my horizon. I kind of lost my horizon line in all these lines, so I'm going to make it a little bit darker so it stands out compared to the other ones. I know where it is and I can see it, but I want to make sure you can see it. That one is my horizon. Yeah, that's lighter, darker. So I'm going to put another building here, but I'm going to make this one taller. It's going to be set back about here. I think that's a better space to set buildings back. I'm just picking a spot and I'm making this going to be a much taller building. So like before, that facade is easy enough. This is going to be a decently sized building. Try to get this parallel. There we go, my front facade. Now, how far to bring this back? I already have a line here. I'm going to bring this one back a little bit farther, like it's kind of a deeper building. And that'll give me some space to work with there. And then I have these lines coming up that I'm using to bring that back. Now this building is obviously much larger than this one. This is like a whole city block if that's a building. This one maybe should come back farther to make these two buildings fit in the same kind of logical space. I'm going to put another building here so I don't. There we go. So again, I'm using these reference lines to guesstimate. So I have my front facade, and then it can come back whatever distance I want it to. All right. Let's make this one come back a little bit more so that it's not lining up with that other line. There we go. Now that this building seems a little bit more. All right, so I have 3 buildings in here. What I would want to do is go ahead and start really filling this in. I'm going to make my road darker just so you can see it a little better. See what actually is my road. I want to completely fill this with buildings. I'm not going to go crazy with it in this video, just for time's sake. But I could put something small in here. Maybe a park actually would be nice. Figuring out what kind of little park I want to have in there, like some swing sets or something. And bringing buildings in here, and then also coming back here. One of the things that I do want to do is, if I'm going to be putting a lot of buildings in and I'm going to be bringing it back, is figuring out the footprint of my buildings. So this square down here is the footprint of that building. If this building was on the ground, which it is, most buildings are, where does it, what space does it occupy? This one here, that's the building's, well, no, this here is the building's footprint. So I can see this square here, I can see this square down here. That tells me where these buildings are located, and I can use that to help me, because I want to make sure if I have another building coming from behind that the other building isn't taking up the same space. So I can say I can have a building that comes from, I'm going to put a footprint of another building it can come from here. And I can have it come out farther than this. And if this is the building's footprint, then I know it's not taking up the same space as this building or this building. Sometimes you can get really messed up in these drawings when you realize I made a new building that takes up the same space as a building I already drew. And that obviously is not possible, and it's not, and it can be really confusing in your drawings. It'll look wrong and you'll be like, what did I do wrong? So let's make this one a little tall. Let's make it come up above the horizon. Yeah. Just a little bit. All right, so this then needs to come down ever so slightly. That needs to come up to right there. All right, so now I have a building back there that it's not taking up the same space as either of these buildings. It's a separate building. So once I start getting a bunch of buildings in here, let's do a little building right here just for the fun of it. And that's the last one I'll put in this drawing. All right. So this is enough for me to move forward with. If you're wanting to make this look really nice, you need more buildings than this. This is kind of a sparse city. There's a lot of blank space. So I would want to have something in here, stuff coming behind, trying to fill this in. I need more coming above the horizon. There's a whole lot I want to do with this. But this is enough for us to kind of push forward. So once you have these buildings, the next thing you can do is play with them. Try to make some changes. Try to make them not so block-like. So I can take a space like this space here, and maybe I'm just going to cut a space out of it. Let's make I'm just going to cut out a cube. So you can see I've divided this into, there's another cube space here. I'm going to go ahead and bring this middle line in, and that's going to come down. All right, so I have this space, this other cube in there, and I'm going to erase around it the original cube. I drew this really dark so that it doesn't erase well. Don't draw so dark. Again, I have to draw dark enough that you can see on video. Until you have your final drawing, you should be drawing really light. So I'm going to do the best I can to erase these. Hopefully it goes better when you do it. All right. So now I have I've changed the shape. Look at that. And I can do this and play with it. I can add some French doors here. Bring this, straighten that out a little. All right, there's some doors coming out on a patio thing. I can make whatever changes I want to this. So there is like a little patio. It obviously needs some kind of railing so that people don't plunge to their deaths, as they clearly would do in this. Yeah, I can add things to the top of buildings. I can change the roof shape if I want. So let's say I wanted this to look more like a regular house type space. So for making this more like a pitched roof house, what I'm going to do is find the center. Whenever you need the center of a cube, what you're going to do is make an X. And that gives me the center, a center point there. I'm going to use that center point to cut this in half. And the reason I'm using that center point to then make this halfway to divide this into two halves is because that's not quite in the right spot. There we go. That's a little better. Is because this from here to here is going to be a little bit longer than from here to here. And I need to figure out how long. And from there, I can bring this line straight up. And that gives me an apex that I can use to make a triangle. I'm going to bring this straight up here. I'm just going to bring it past because that will tell me where to end coming back, where that center is of the back of the building. And now I have a triangular roof on there. All of this in here, I don't need anymore. There we go. More like a house shape. Let's say I want to do a similar type. I already have this line that comes back here. I just need this line. Dropped my eraser. Oh well. I guess I can't make any more mistakes. So I can draw this line across. I'm going to make this X like I did with the first one to find the center of this square. So this is the center right here. I'm going to bring that straight up. And then with using that, I can get a cone, not a cone, a pyramid on the top of this roof. Didn't quite go to the point. and I can give myself a pyramid roof there. But now buildings that tall don't tend to have a pyramid on their roof. So what I can do is I can cut it off somewhere. I'm going to cut it off right here. Make it flat on top of that, coming down to my vanishing point. So that will give me kind of a, it's flat on the top, but it angles in. It's kind of a beveled roof here. All right, so the last thing I'm going to talk about is windows and patterns, repeating patterns, and how to address them. So one of the easiest ways to figure out windows on a building like this is how many windows do I want? How do I want to make this work? How many floors do I want it to be? So I'm going to take this and I'm going to look at it being, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 3/4. So I'm going to split this into 1/2 inch sections. I'm just making a dot every 1/2 inch. And the bottom floor is going to be taller because sometimes the bottom floor is different. The bottom floor on this is going to be 3/4 of an inch. And now I'm using my lines that I already have to make these windows. Trying more or less to get them to be equal. This one's real close to the horizon, so it's almost flat across. I wanted these to be perfect, perfect, perfect. I could, let's say this is, I don't remember how many inches it was. Let's say it's 4 inches here and it's 3 inches there. I could divide that 4 inches into 4, divide that 3 inches into 4, and measure that on both sides, and I would get equal spacing. See, that angled a little bit too much. I'm going to do those last 2 lines over. It does make things harder when your vanishing points are off your page. My last 3 were off. It can be very helpful to put your, if you have a long enough table, to draw vanishing points that are on your table that are farther out. I'm going to call that good. It's not perfect, but it's fine. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 windows tall. Do I want it to be 8 wide? Sure. If I want it to be 7 windows wide, it'll be more square. If I want it to be 5, I can choose based on how many I count down. Let's do, okay, so I have 7 windows high, but I'm going to make it 5 wide just so you can see what it looks like doing it differently. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to draw a line from corner to corner. And what that does is it crosses in these points. And I can bring a line straight up and down everywhere that it crosses. And that gets me a grid on this that I can use to build windows to figure out how I want to do the windows. Now, the reason I'm doing this as a grid like this is because when it's flat going mostly that way, it's easier. But when things are really going down to a vanishing point, so I'm going to continue these same angles this way. When those are really getting closer together to go to a vanishing point, that's when it is very important that I do this grid to figure out what those windows are doing. All right, so I have my cascade going back that way. Let's stick with still 5. Still going with 5. I'm going to go across this way. So from corner to corner, I'm going 5 windows down, making that diagonal in there, and finding these points. Now, as I bring these points down, you should notice that these lines get closer together as they come back. And they do. You can see these lines here are closer together than these lines here. But it's in perspective. It's all even. It all makes sense. So I have a nice, good, even grid. Even if I don't end up making all of these windows, even if I end up just making these windows here and erasing all of the rest of the lines, those windows are even, they make sense, they're in perspective, they're in a good space. Maybe I want to take this corner out entirely, just for the fun of it. So it's kind of like this corner is cantilevered out. That's kind of fun. So yeah, I can really play with this. I can mess around with it in any way that I want. I can change the roof line. I don't have to stick with these block shaped objects. So this building makes some sense to me. And then, yeah, I could even decide I'm going to make a building rounded. So to do that, I'm going to pick a couple spots on it. Bring those back. I'm using those to define how far my curve goes on the building. And I can go zoop. And I'm making the same curve here. It's going to look a little different back there. Voila. I have my corner is no longer squared off. And the more things you change in here, the more this space starts to look dynamic. It starts to look interesting. Getting buildings on there, billboards, signs, people, trees. I could have some nice little trees coming in here because this is a park, right? I think we decided I'm going to have a park here. So I can start to get some little trees in there and pathways. Oh, that almost looks like a pond actually, which is all right. So figuring out those in-between spaces and what's in those. Awnings can be fun. You can see why I prefer the kneaded erasers. They don't have all of this dust. So for an awning, that comes out too far. All right, so I have an awning on this building here. Get rid of that edge. That's kind of fun. So there's no limit to what I can do with this space. All right. Now, if I just want to bisect this, I don't want to do a whole grid. It's a lot of work. So I can just cut it in half. This gives me my center here. And then if I want to cut it in half again, I can do that. Do the same thing here. Try not to get my head in the way. So to do this, I made an X on the whole thing to get this point, to get that center line, and then I made an X in each half to get another center line. Now I can erase these lines out. And I have this evenly spaced area going back. And I can use that to build myself some windows. Maybe I want to come in a little bit. And I can use that to make these my windows. All right. So that is pretty much it. I can fill this with buildings. I can put a lot more buildings in here, and I can play with these grids on surfaces and finding center lines to try to give myself a good space, a good cohesive space. See, now I'm just doodling. So that's how I know I'm done with this tutorial. So once you get those cubes in there, that's when it starts to get just kind of fun. You can play with it and turn it into whatever you want it to be. All right, I hope you found this helpful, and I will have more videos coming. Again, this is like I said before, when you have a 2-point perspective drawing, technically this is 3-point. We have a point here and we have 2 points that are off of our page in either direction. It's still not quite perfectly accurate. There should be a 3rd point in each direction. So I should have another point that's over in this corner, a little bit down from each of these bottom corners, that these up and down lines should also follow a vanishing point, which it just gets really confusing, which is why I'm not worrying about those. It would really mess you up in these drawings. So know that it would be more accurate with more vanishing points, but it would be more complicated, and this is complicated enough already. All right, well, I am going to stop here. Good luck.